Good afternoon, Conference. As Harry Donaldson indicated this morning, the NEC has requested the Conference Arrangements Committee to timetable a statement on Brexit. You should have this contained within the paper to the CAC report too. We had a lengthy debate on this morning, so I'm now going to ask John Trickett, on behalf of the NEC, to move the statement. We'll take the vote on the statement at the end of the session.
Chair, thank you very much. Conference, I want briefly, on behalf of the NEC, to move the statement which you've got in front of you while this thing moves itself up and down, by the way. Look, I think it was only right and proper that on such an important and crucial issue as Brexit, that it be debated in full in the conference, as it was this morning. But it's now equally important that we show maximum unity by endorsing our position, which is crystal clear, and in which our Labour values shine through in every line of the statement. We are all committed to a future Labour government which will deliver a jobs-first Brexit. And Labour is united too in making sure this Tory government cannot use Brexit to create a race to the bottom, cutting workers' rights and damaging our economy. And Conference, Labour will never engage in racism or xenophobia. We recognise that migrant workers make a huge contribution to our economy. And, as Diane Abbott said yesterday, we will not make false promises, nor will we whip up division in our country. 6 months after the triggering of Article 50, this government has made no progress on the Brexit negotiations. They're too busy squabbling amongst themselves, indulging their own personal political ambitions, rather than putting the needs of the country first. And so this statement offers to us the opportunity to show that, and to the country. As Keir Starmer said this morning, it's we, the Labour Party, who are now the grown-ups in the room. And Labour is ready to take the mantle and to deliver a Brexit deal which protects our jobs, protects our communities, our hard-won rights, our environment, and above all, the future of our country. And we will not agree to so-called Henry VIII powers being handed over to such untrustworthy Tory ministers whose names we all know. Conference, we are committed to remaining long-term partners with our neighbours in Europe. But I am sure that we all agree that form should follow function, and therefore our resolve must be, surely, to set out to deliver our Labour objectives. And it will be with this which will then define the precise institutional relationship which we have with the EU following those negotiations. And therefore, I ask Conference to support this statement. Back our leadership and our shadow Brexit team and the NEC, and this position which unites the whole party, and equally importantly, shows a way forward to the whole country whenever the election comes. I move. Thank you very much.
Thank you, John. Conference, our debate this afternoon is on jobs, living standards and equalities. In this debate, we will be talking about our policies to improve the prosperity of the country and make working people better off. We will also be talking about workers' rights, fairness and equality. In addition to the Economy, Business and Trade Policy Commission report, we will be taking the report of the Work, Pensions and Equality Policy Commission. That's a lot of things to say. On pages 69 to 77 of the National Policy Forum report. We will start by taking contemporary composite 4 on workers' rights to be moved by Usdaw, and could the GMB be ready to second?
Chair, Delegates, John Hannett, General Secretary of the Union Usdaw. Moving the composite on workers' rights, an extremely important motion, one that affects many workers, if not all workers. And let me start by thanking those CLPs who submitted motions on this very important subject for their help in keeping the issue on the agenda, and rightly so. Delegates, I've been involved in the trade union movement like many of you for many years. I'm well aware that the place of work is a constant changing environment. The challenge of productivity, the question of workers' inequality, and the insecurity that too many workers face. Do you know, when I was given evidence to the Select Committee about the role of trade unions on the Trade Union Act, I made the point, I repeat again, that trade unions are not the problem causers, but the problem solvers. And the reality of that point is this. The reality of that point is this. That as we face the challenges, a very extremely challenge of the workplace of tomorrow, the challenge for trade unions is to be in that debate, informing the debate, putting forward constructive policies on the way forward. Now, delegates, my conference representatives are here from Usdaw. And let me thank them, first of all, for ensuring that my union has grown by 100,000 members over 10 years. A fantastic result, which actually makes the point that unions are relevant and people will join if the approach is right and the offer is right. But of course, let me also give a level of honesty in this debate as well. That whilst we want to protect workers' rights, we have to improve the level of membership within the trade union movement. 13.4% of members are in the private sector. The challenges are enormous, and we must meet it. Because it's only through independent trade unions that the voice of workers can be heard. And let me congratulate Dave Prentice and Unison for that fantastic result on tribunal fees. And let me also, delegates, say that we can make a difference politically because our industrial aspirations as a trade union, our responsibilities to negotiate, go hand in hand with our political direction also. And what I mean by that, delegates, is this. That when we were told as a trade union we could not defeat the government on further deregulation of Sunday trading, we didn't take that as a foregone conclusion. We campaigned, we made sure that we had an evidence-based argument, and we defeated the Tories. And that can be done again. And let me also make this point as we go on the journey towards the next election. Conference, this is a moment in time where we must seize the opportunity to protect workers' rights. As one delegate said to me only yesterday, and they made the point to me, does it really make a difference between a Labour government and a Tory government? And I said, well, look, there's two ways of addressing that question. The best way to address it is study the history books. Look at the record of previous Labour governments and look what our opponents have done in office. And in March next year, we've got the Trade Union Act. The Trade Union Act is a piece of legislation with one primary aim: to affect our ability to campaign on workplace rights and issues. So our political travel goes hand in hand with our industrial negotiations. And let me make this plea to the progressive employers out there. You know, an employer has nothing to fear if they're prepared to engage with the workers. And I'll tell you why that's the case, Conference. You know, workers who give up their labour do not want the business to fail. Their security depends on the business success. But if the most important asset for an employer is their employees, don't be afraid of engagement. Don't stereotype trade unions as, in a sense, a force for bad. Look at the most successful companies in this country and look how many trade unions are organised in those companies. So it's a myth, Conference. But here's the key challenge for us now. Do not assume that those workplace rights that were won are there in stone. What has been given can be taken away. And we have to make sure in moving this motion, we bring it to life, we campaign for a Labour victory, and then let's implement the values that we stand for. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Conference. Tim Roach, GMB, proud to second this composite and proud of the work my union is doing in challenging the scourge that is precarious employment. Because, Conference, organising precarious workers is bloody hard work. It's resource intensive, it's costly, and you come against every barrier, every block, every legal challenge imaginable. So what's crucial as we start out in this speech is that as a movement we demonstrate solidarity for each other, not look for a backdoor way to undermine a sister union, score a cheap win, let an employer off the hook and, worst of all, let those workers down. And that takes me on to Uber. I'm proud of the GMB's work in challenging Uber to the extent that a court ridiculed them. And they said that the people that they use as drivers were not employees. Of course they're employees, and I've never seen a court judgment so scathing. And, Conference, just hot off the press today, the GMB has just won another one. Addison Lee have just been held to say that their drivers too are employees. Another win for the GMB. And why does this matter? Why is it important? Because by not paying their taxes, by not playing fair, we've created an uneven playing field. An uneven playing field, in this instance, in the private hire and taxi industry. And if anyone doubts that's real, come out to the demonstration the GMB held earlier and talk to the private hire drivers in Brighton, who was flooded with drivers with their London Uber licence, now practising in Brighton to drive down rates of ethical company drivers. And speak to Abdul in Coventry, where again Uber aren't allowed to practice, but drivers from Wolverhampton go into Coventry driving down rates so that Abdul says his rates are now half what they were 2 years ago. It's a scandal. And I want to pay tribute to Sadiq Khan and Transport for London for taking this bold and brave decision. But, Conference, I've just seen this morning that the new CEO of Uber has issued an apology and admitted that they got it wrong. Well, isn't it interesting how quickly apologies and wrongdoing comes up when the bottom line is under threat? But that doesn't just happen automatically. It happens because we fight. It happens because we care. And it happens because we take these people on. So, OK, Uber, that's a start. You admitted you got it wrong. But it's actions now, not words. Actions to pay your taxes. Actions to treat your employees with the dignity and respect that they deserve. And actions to ensure regulation and, more importantly, the safety of the public who climb into your cars. And let's start with being honest and transparent about your figures. You've declared 116 million income, and yet you claim to have 40,000 workers. Well, they're not workers, are they? You've denied that one. But if you equate the figures, they either employ 40,000 at 2 hours a week or 2,800 at 40 hours a week. Which way do you want it? And no, Andrew Marr, I have never used an Uber cab, like you asked Jeremy Corbyn. But go and ask Theresa May if she's used an Uber cab. And better still, go and ask her ministers if not only they've used an Uber, but while you're at it, if they use the big businesses who they've given big corporation tax cuts to. Go and ask them if they all kiss out the same trough. It's a scandal. And whilst all of those cuts are happening, austerity is cutting our members as well. GMB care workers who look after your parents or your grandparents, who literally have to manage, if they're lucky, on the minimum wage. NHS workers breaking under the strain, cut after cut after cut when prices go up. And teaching assistants I represent who are literally dipping in their purses to try and look after the kids because they care so much. Conference, we have a moral responsibility. These things are not cheap for nothing. They're cheap at the expense of workers. So it's not good enough for you to get into an Uber cab and then deny or pretend it was a proper licensed one. It's not good enough to use Ryanair when Michael Leary abuses his workers by making them pay a fee to interview for a job and pay them nothing for 6 months while they train. It's not good enough to use Amazon because it's cheap, because behind the glossy website there are people being abused. And it's not good enough to go in Starbucks and when you come sneaking out, wrap your hand around the cup in case anyone sees you. I don't want you to just vote in support of this motion. I want you to do something about it for these workers. And I'll tell you this, for these unscrupulous employers, you keep abusing your workers and GMB are coming after you. Please support. Thank you.
So our first speaker is the delegate from Bristol West who was called but did not speak this morning. Can I now see all those who wish to speak in this debate? I can't see, have I? Excuse me, can you move the camera? I can't see the... Excuse me, person on the left here, cameraman. I can't see the delegates. The lady in the red dress. No, the lady here, the blonde-haired lady, yes. Yes. No, this lady here. I've got 3 speakers, thank you. No. The lady with the blonde hair, yes.
Well, it's a bit high-tech. I go.
Chair Conference, Rob Witherspoon, Bristol West, speaking in support of Composite 1. I'll speak to you as a first-time delegate and as a postal worker who last week voted yes to strike action in our national dispute. And, Conference, you may think we're a bit old-fashioned in the trade unions, but let me tell you, we've been all over the social media. We've been on MyFace, Twister, I think that's what they're called. And pictures have been flooding in from around the country from postmen and women queuing up to post their ballot papers to vote yes for strike action. Talk about making work for yourself. As you've heard, in their quest for fat dividends for shareholders, Royal Mail have chosen not only to attack the public service that you enjoy, but also to attack our pensions and working conditions. And Royal Mail is seeing the kind of insecure labour models that Tim Roach just spoke so powerfully about and saying, we want some of that. They're saying they want the young postal workers of the future on insecure contracts, on crap pay, on pensions that will leave workers in pension poverty. And I'm very proud to say that my union has said it is not our job to pull the ladder up for the next generation. We will fight for our terms and conditions, and we will fight for the terms and conditions of the workers of the future. But I'll tell you what makes me proud as a relatively new member of this party is knowing that when we carry this, renationalise means renationalise. There won't be somebody going to the press afterwards saying, actually, don't worry about what Conference says, because I believe now Conference is sovereign, and what we say goes. And not only that, it makes me very proud to know that if we take strike action, Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell will give us the same unconditional, unstinting support they have always given workers in dispute. And I believe they will also give that same unconditional and unstinting opposition to devastating Tory austerity. Conference, please support.
Conference, Tracy Wainwright from Unison, proud to be on this platform to talk about the WASPI campaign. A grassroots campaign set up by a small group of women who decided to take on the government and their unfair treatment of women born in the 1950s. That campaign has grown, with a lot of hard work and dedication from women involved, including many of our own Unison members, and it is an issue close to Unison's heart. We have been working alongside the WASPI campaigners to bring about justice for older working women at national level with legal, financial and political resources. Across our regions, our members have been actively involved in the campaigns on the ground. Women making lots of noise, Unison women as well as WASPI women, are seasoned campaigners and activists. And the reason we've become so involved is that this is a very key campaign to Unison. In Unison alone, we have identified more than 160,000 women who are directly affected by this pension theft. That's more than 1 in 10 of our members, all losing because the Tory government decided, yet again, that women could pay the price for their plans. As public sector workers, many on low wages and many more with career breaks for caring roles, they do not have a decent occupational pension to rely on. At best, they may have a few thousand to top up their state pension, nowhere near the gold-plated pensions that the Tories keep telling us public sector workers get. These are women who planned their lives with the expectation of retiring at 60. No one told them it was increasing, and the Tories rushed through this policy at a speeded-up rate which cost women tens of thousands of pounds in lost state pension, stolen state pension. But we are not letting them get away with it. After all, shy women really get heard, and Unison women are anything but shy. Unison are now in the process of contacting women affected and advising them of how to register maladministration complaints with the Department for Work and Pensions. One more step in the campaign, one more step to get justice for WASPy women. Conference, together as a Labour movement, we can and have achieved great things, and we can and must get justice for our WASPy women. I have a message for Theresa May. Never underestimate the power of an extremely peed-off woman born in the 1950s, let alone a swarm of them, and they are coming for you. Thank you.
3 more. Can I have a show of hands, please? Indicate if you want to speak. So, person there with the hand up. No, I was just going to... Well, if you just let me finish. So, yes, the person that's just gone like that, right at the back. Next to the red flag. Next to the red flag with the white cardigan. The person that's waving a scarf at that side there, yes. Yep, and the lady with the green. Oh, 3 women.
Okay. Good afternoon, conference. My name is Leslie Laird. I'm one of Scottish Labour's new MPs, and we are delighted to be here. I'm here today to share the message that we have, that Labour is back in Scotland and that we are here fighting to get a Labour government elected. Thank you, conference. It's a real pleasure to be here today in this wonderful, vibrant city in Bristol. And just like Brighton, and just like Brighton, the mood of our party is vibrant. I want to thank you for all the energy that you bring to our party, because that is where we are today, and that is all thanks to you. I also want to give a very special shout out to those of you who are from Scotland here today. Because despite what some people might think, we are alive and kicking. Friends, the stark reality in this country is this: we have a government that claims to be competent, that claims to be compassionate, that claims to be caring, but is absolutely nothing of the kind. Friends, the poisonous medicine of austerity was supposed to fix our economy. Instead, after over 7 years of austerity, the Tories have mismanaged our economy and failed on their own terms. They have missed every fiscal target that they ever set themselves. The deficit was supposed to be eradicated by 2015. Public sector net debt was supposed to fail. Instead, it has failed. Instead, it has increased by 150 billion over the last year. Meanwhile, the real cost here is in human terms. People stripped of their dignity, hope extinguished, wages frozen, services declining, poverty increasing, benefits slashed. A generation of young people who will be less well off than the last. In Scotland, the Tory and the SNP governments have failed to create the well-paid, rewarding work that we need. Instead, people are left to scrape by in poorly paid work and zero-hours contracts. Around 1 million people in Scotland are living in poverty. 500,000 are in work, yet still in poverty. And nearly 500,000 earn less than the minimum wage. More than 250,000 children in Scotland are in poverty. A 40,000 increase in a one-year period. A figure that should shame the Tories and the SNP, but sadly it does not. Even those we value most in our society are not safe. The nurses and the doctors who we rely upon in our most vulnerable hours. The police and the fire service who risk their lives every day. Conference, enough. When Labour wins the next election, we will be ready to transform society, to restore aspiration and opportunity, to restore dignity and respect, to reignite hope bit by bit. We will ban zero-hours contracts. We will introduce a £10 an hour living wage. We will end the public sector pay cap. We will protect the triple lock on pensions, and we will not stop there. Because if we see real change in our economy, then society has to invest. In Scotland, we will establish a Scottish investment bank, releasing 20 billion of lending power to invest in our economy and to create the highly skilled jobs that our economy so desperately needs. And Labour's spending plans set out in our manifesto would translate to over £3 billion a year in additional resources for a Scottish Parliament through Barnett consequentials, a vital injection of funds following the repeated cuts of Tory and the SNP. Politics is ultimately about choice, what you spend your time doing and who you spend your time doing it for. We have very different politics in the Labour Party, and we will make very different choices. We will invest in our young people, in our workers and in our vital public services. We will invest in housing and education. We will invest in jobs and skills, and we will invest in the many, not the few. The Tories and the SNP have one thing in common. They protect the rich at the expense of the poor. But it's time for change. You all know that. And that time is now. And that's why, all day, every day, we all need to keep campaigning. Because, friends, this is the only way we will get a Labour government elected. Now is the time for the only party who have ever had the political will to deliver the change that this country needs. Now is the time to stay focused on the big prize. Let's not get distracted from that ultimate goal. So, when you go home to your constituencies, keep campaigning, keep building hope, and let's get the Tories out. Let's all work together. Let's deliver a Labour government that will deliver for the many, not the few. Thank you.
So just before the next speaker, the lady at the back that I called that was waving a big scarf around, can you please stand up? Yep, do you want to come down?
My name's Nadia Faraza, and I'm from Islington South. This is my first conference and my first time as delegate. So if my speech gets a bit boring, you can zone out for the next 3 minutes. Since the age of 21, I've had a chronic joint condition. And after my first job at university, I had a temporary job for a few months, and I ended up getting a flare-up of my condition. And during this flare-up, I decided that I needed to take a week off. It was one of the worst flares I've ever had of my joint condition, and I was in agony every day. During this week, the employer emailed me to say that they simply couldn't take a person who had to take time off for a sickness. so I was fired from my first ever job. And after this experience, my self-confidence was completely crushed. I started questioning whether I could even work at all with having such an up and down joint condition. We do have statutory rights for temporary employers, but these employers need to be held to account so that things like this don't happen to people in the future who are trying to struggle through illnesses and still make a valuable contribution to the workforce. I also want to speak about workers' rights in terms of women's rights. In every area of workforces, women are always left behind. We see an underrepresentation of women in areas like engineering, where they make up only 8% of this group. And in 2015, 21% of small and medium-sized businesses were being run by women. In this year, we have 3 in 5 women saying that when they take a career break from having children, from simply needing time off work because they're looking after their elderly parents, they go back to lower skilled jobs and lower paid jobs. Why is that happening in 2017? It simply shouldn't be the case that women are penalised because they need to take a career break for whatever reason they need to. Conference, we have so many incredible women in the Labour Party who inspire women like me. My own MP, Emily Thornberry, I greatly admire. Let us, the Labour Party, be the party who genuinely supports all people who want to simply work hard. Let us women, us ethnic minorities, the disabled, the ill, the healthy, everyone, be part of the many in the workforce and not the few who are left behind.
Deirdre Costigan, Labour Party, Irish Society, speaking in support of workers' rights. Conference, I'm from Dublin in the Republic of Ireland, and in the 22 years I lived there, I crossed the border to the north just twice. On those 2 occasions, I saw British soldiers with machine guns on the streets. I saw armoured trucks, and I saw fear in people's eyes on both sides. But in 1998, a Labour government helped to deliver the Good Friday Agreement, bringing peace, jobs and prosperity. As part of that agreement, the UK government committed to being an independent guardian of the peace. That's partly why the Labour Party doesn't stand candidates in Northern Ireland elections. And that's why the Tories' deal with the DUP is such a betrayal. Conference, the Tories' hard Brexit will be an even bigger betrayal of the peace process and of the many cross-border bodies that were established in the context of EU membership. But it will be an even bigger betrayal of workers' rights, both north and south of the border. There are 310 crossing points along the Irish border, and last year 110 million journeys were made across it. People crossed to drop their kids at the childminders, to visit family and friends, and to go to work. For workers on both sides of the border, a hard Brexit is an attack on their jobs, it's an attack on their livelihoods. Like me, some of these workers are Unison members. If the Tory Brexiteers get their way, these Unison members will need to take their passports to get to work every day. Now, the Tories claim it will be an invisible border with X-ray vision CCTV cameras. The EU has called this magical thinking. Well, maybe it's because I'm Irish, but I think it's just a lie. Conference, Irish workers here in Britain are also at risk. Irish nurses and Irish navvies helped to build this country, just as Filipino nurses and Polish builders are continuing the job. A hard Brexit will mean Irish workers like me are second-class citizens. Labour, the party of the workers and the party of equality, cannot let this happen. Look, it's absolutely obvious that when Theresa May says there will be no physical infrastructure on the Irish border, she's lying, which makes me think that when she says migrant workers' rights will be protected, she's lying, which makes me think and know when she says the peace process will be protected, she's lying. Labour cannot sit on the fence on this one. We need to protect the peace process, the common travel area. Most of all, we need to stand up for Irish and British workers, whether they live in Belfast, in Brighton or in Bundoran. Thank you, Conference.
I'm going to call 3 more speakers. The delegate, yes. Yep. And the person with the red umbrella on that side.
Hi, my name's Liz Haynes. I'm sorry I've lost my voice. I've been shouting so much. I'm CLP delegate for Gainsborough in Lincolnshire, which is in the East Midlands, and it's a safe Tory seat. And I suspect will always be a safe Tory seat, but we're working at it. We're working at it. And I want to speak to you about my experience coming back to the party because I was a party in the 90s. I was a member in the 90s during the Blair years, and Blair did a lot of good things for the party. But one of the things that I didn't find that I enjoyed about being a member of the party was I actually got quite bored because we didn't have any input really into what was happening. We were told how to vote, etc. And I've come back to the party, and these amazing people that are now running the party, Jeremy, John, Emily, Richard Bergen, Kat Smith, Rebecca Long-Bailey. I mean, I'm sorry if I've left anyone out, but they're just such amazing people. And I'm so passionate and invigorated, and I'm sure all of you are. I was a visitor last year, and the feel of this hall is so different to how it was last year. Everybody is very passionate and engaged. And the other thing that I'm finding is that, you know, John has talked about when we do things. When John says we, John means us. He means all of us. We're all members, and we're all treated equally, from Jeremy right down to people like me, who's just a basic member and activist. And I encourage you all, if you're not already, and I'm sure many of you are, to get involved in whatever you can to help the workers. I've joined Momentum, which has hardly been mentioned this conference. And I'm now on the NCG. And I've also joined Unite Community, and I was at Sports Direct the other week campaigning against Mike Ashley, and we stood outside with our banners and we leafleted the workers. And I'm also involved in a project called Sheffield Needs a Pay Rise in Sheffield, and we're working with the Bakers Union. We were involved in the McDonald's demo, and just get involved in whatever you can to push things for Labour, with the unions, with Momentum. However you can get involved, do get involved. You know, if you feel that you're in a safe Tory seat, work in the safe Tory seat, but also go to the marginals, find out which are going to be the next marginals and work in them. Yeah, okay, and nice to talk to you all.
Conference. I'm Rebecca Boot, the delegate for Aldridge Brown Hills. I have to talk to you about two issues. The first is to ask you to vote against Composite 3 from today's contemporary motions, asking for the Labour Party to endorse supported workplaces. We don't need supported workplaces, we need disabled people, we need all workplaces to be supportive workplaces of disabled people. That means access to work is properly funded, the cuts are reversed and it is improved. It means that workplaces are forced to comply with the Equality Act. Conference, the second issue I need to talk to you about is related. It's wheelchair funding. Most wheelchair funding comes from the NHS, but this service is underfunded and overstretched. A safe wheelchair which works properly should be a right, not a privilege. Wheelchairs are vehicles of freedom. My wheelchair enables me to be here with you today, to go to university and to socialise with my friends. My wheelchair means I can choose what I do with my life and when. But I, like many others, have the wrong wheelchair. This wheelchair causes me pain and regular dislocations. Funding for wheelchairs is a postcode lottery. This wheelchair, this power chair, costs around £2,500, and that's at the bottom end of the market. The chair I need costs 4 times as much. Not having the right chair costs me sleep, it costs me study time, and it costs me time with my family and my friends while I lie in bed recovering from the pain that my wheelchair has caused. I don't know if I'm going to get the right chair. I'm still waiting to be assessed by the services that are so overstretched that they are still seeing people who ask for an appointment in February now. I don't know when they assess me if they'll agree to fund what I need. I can't wait forever. The Tories' chronic underfunding of NHS wheelchair services is costing me my freedom, and it's costing the local authority in personal care funding. But getting the right wheelchair, a wheelchair which functions properly and doesn't cause me additional pain and discomfort, is really hard work. Having the wrong wheelchair means I'm living a life of social exclusion, isolation, and unfulfilled potential. Last month, the United Nations told the Tory government that its social cuts policy is a human catastrophe for disabled people. They are ignoring their obligations under international human rights law. Conference, today I've had to make the difficult decision to crowdfund for a new wheelchair, but that is not acceptable. The Tories' failure to properly fund wheelchairs is just one example of their failed state for disabled people. It was a Labour government that introduced our Equality Act. It was a Labour government that signed the international treaty protecting the human rights of disabled people, and we need a Labour government again to ensure the full inclusion and empowerment of disabled people in our society. Thank you very much.
Hello there, good afternoon Conference. I'm Paula Holland and I'm a very proud Newcastle City Councillor. I'm a lifelong Unison member and I'm here representing Newcastle East CLP. Hi Linda. Sorry. And also my local party branch. Last night was my very first composite meeting and it was very interesting and it was very lively. As us and JMB were there and I was trying to get them to let one of the CLPs second the motion, but it didn't work out. But never mind, it was very comradely and very supportive. I wanted to talk to you though today about, as someone who's worked in the public sector for over 30 years, I'm obviously very passionate about public services. Many of our branch members also work in the public services and are rightly angry at the erosion of their workers' rights due to this Tory government. The increase on people working just 0 hours or short hours is a disgrace. Businesses underpaying employees is, in my view, criminal. And the fact that some workers are still fighting for the living wage, maternity rights, sick pay, and the right to join a union is outrageous in 2017. The latest position on the Tories on the pay cap, in my view, is just cynical and divisive. They're trying to set workers up against each other. Let's not let that happen, colleagues. I remember a previous Tory minister referring to the ambulance service and the staff as people who just scooped people up and then transported them to hospital. And as many of you know out there, paramedics are absolute lifesavers. But I think that view, though, still prevails today with the Tories. It's very awful to see them lining up after a disaster, praising services and saying they're heroes, but they actually still won't pay people a fair wage. It's right, Conference, that we support the Labour Party's commitment to workers' rights. And that includes the rights of EU citizens and nationals who've made their home in this country. It's right that the Labour Party should introduce a real living wage, ban 0 hours, and end the public sector pay freeze. Let's repeal the Trade Union Act and scrap all these anti-union laws and end the Tories' attack on workers' rights. Thank you.
Please take 3 more speakers. The gentleman here with the GMB. I don't know what they're saying.
They're shouting Wales.
Have they already spoken? The woman waving the scarf right at the back. And the delegate in the white shirt and red tie on this side. Speakers. Can you all take your seats, please?
Hello, Conference. My name is Vince Barry, and I'm a first-time speaker from Plymouth, Sutton and Devonport CLP. I'm incredibly proud to be standing here before you today, not just as a delegate from a CLP, but as the Labour and cooperative candidate for Torridge and West Devon at the last general election. Conference, in that election, I was told time and time again that I should step aside for the Liberal Democrats, because, to quote them, Labour does not win in rural seats. Well, let me tell you this. Despite the naysayers and all those who looked down on me because of my age, I trebled the Labour vote, and for the first time ever, Labour came second in Torridge and West Devon. That's right, Conference. Thanks to the Labour movement, a working-class lad from Plymouth took on Britain's highest-paid MP and came out with the best result ever for our party and our movement. During that election, Conference, I'm sure that you were struck, as I was, by the arrogance of the Conservative Party and the way their manifesto disregarded the concerns and aspirations of ordinary British people. Sadly, this has not changed. Despite the British people rejecting Theresa May's plan for a hard Brexit in what was dubbed the Brexit election, she and her government continued to pursue a strategy that would be ruinous for British jobs. Comrades, Theresa May and her coalition of chaos have said that no deal is better than a bad deal. Well, they might be true for her and our billionaire friends in our ivory towers, but for those of us who live in the real world, no deal would be a disaster. For my region and my city, no deal would be calamitous. If you look at the Southwest, the 3 biggest exporters in terms of percentage in the EU, to the EU are from my region. Exeter, 70%. Bristol, 66%, and my hometown of Plymouth, 68%. Conference, if Labour is anything, it is a party grounded in reality. And whilst Theresa May, bumbling Boris, and David Davis wander around their head in the clouds, I employ our party to plant its feet firmly in the ground. Our country will be damaged beyond repair if we do not retain permanent membership of the single market and customs union. For the good of our workers and for the good of protecting British jobs, let's fight to maintain permanent membership of the single market and customs union.
Madam Chair, Conference, Andy Newman speaking for the GMB. I was privileged at the last general election to stand in Chippenham. The previous greatest contribution that Chippenham made to the British Labour movement is that Jeremy Corbyn was born there. Now, and in standing in that election, it became clear to me with our fantastic manifesto that only Labour was interested in a prosperous, pro-business Britain. The Conservative MP opposed bringing a distribution centre to the town that would have brought 1,000 jobs for NIMBY arguments. Only Labour stood in favour of jobs and investment, and that's because, as a trade unionist, I want employers to treat our members and staff with respect, but we also want their businesses to succeed and be profitable. And in our manifesto, we had fantastic policies for growth and prosperity, a national investment bank, regional development banks, targeted government support for key strategic areas of the economy, a national education and skills strategy, and renewed infrastructure investment in transport, communication and energy, all vital for a prosperous Britain. But an important thing about an industrial strategy is it asks what sort of economy we want. And of course, for industry, we do need machinery, components, we need the raw materials, but we also need people. We know this, we're the Labour Party. We know that human labour is what actually creates the wealth in our society. And we know that everything that is made by industry is actually the fruit of labour, of workers, by hand or by brain. As some of us will remember, used to be on our membership card. And we want workers to have the full fruits of that. So it's very important to understand that, yes, we do need high-skilled, highly trained workers in manufacturing. But we understand that labour is the key part of creating wealth. And that's why those who look after the workforce and the human beings in our society are equally valuable. And the GMB wants to see those who work in the care sector and NHS and education seen as part of our industrial strategy. Because unless we look after the workforce and the people, then we don't have an industrial economy. And let's be quite clear, the people who work in the care sector or in education or in the NHS are equally skilled as engineering workers. They're equally skilled as people who work in manufacturing, but often there's lower prestige and lower wages. So, comrades, we've referred back to the government of 1945 and the fantastic achievements it made. I'm sure that that was the best Labour government so far. The next Labour government that we will go out from this hall and elect with Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister will be the best Labour government ever.
Call 3 more speakers.
Yeah, it is.
So the delegate with the white waistcoat here, yep. The delegate on the chair, yes. No. So, is he coming down? Oh, okay. Yeah, the delegate with the gold card. Yep.
Thank you, Chair. Conference,
My name is Maria Bagnall. I'm from Charnwood CLP, and I'm speaking to Conversite 4, into which the motion of my constituency is incorporated. I thought the speech was going to be difficult, but actually the difficult bit is getting called to speak. But I'm here, so... The workers at McDonald's are amongst the most low paid in the country, with entirely unsatisfactory working conditions. On Saturday, I had the honour of attending the Women's Conference. Those of you who were there may have heard Shen speak. She was one of the first ever McDonald's employees to take strike action. Shen is a phenomenal woman. She's also a phenomenal young woman. Many of the workers at McDonald's and in other service industries are young people. Shen told us about some of the conditions that McDonald's workers face. Bullying and harassment by managers are rife. One young woman who was a victim of domestic violence became homeless with her 4-year-old child after speaking out against this practice. Workers are at risk of injury, and people have lost shifts for speaking out against the culture imposed by management who use any means they can to get the most profit out of people's work. These conditions should not be happening in the 21st century. All workers deserve the right to a safe and secure workplace. McDonald's workers were penalised for joining a union, but through the utterly courageous actions of Shen and her colleagues, staff at 2 restaurants voted overwhelmingly to strike with the support of the BFAWU. But the BFAWU and other trade unions could do a lot more to support these workers without the onerous restrictions of the Trade Union Act and all the anti-trade union laws. This motion commits Labour to repealing the Trade Union Act and all anti-trade union laws introduced in the 1980s and 90s. For unions to be effective, workers need the right to strike, including in solidarity with other workers following political goals, and to picket freely. Strong unions should be freed from legal shackles and bolstered by positive legal rights. This is key to tackling the poverty, insecurity and inequality that so many people endure in Tory Britain. This will transform society through an economy working for the many, not the few. The McDonald's strikers, the picture house workers and those in the service industries are often young people. At the last election, we saw the highest turnout of young voters in 25 years. Those young workers turned up for us. Now we must turn up for them. Please unanimously support this motion. Thank you.
Namaste, Chair, Conference. Neelam Varma, representing Unite the Union. On Saturday, I was able to speak on the fantastic Women's Conference in the economic debate. It's hardly believable in 2017 the economy is still seen as the preserve of men, making serious decisions about how our economy works. The underlying structure that shapes our society is not a women issue. I said then, I say now, there is no more fundamental women issue than what as a society we decide to spend the money on. What public services, what benefits, who has access to them, the job we create, the job we don't, the future that is placed on our work, women's work. The wages we earn, those we don't because of discrimination, the freedom, the opportunity we have through well-funded public services. To be able to control our own lives, the economy is our issue. For those who still say the economy is the preserve of men, they obviously haven't come across our own Becky Long Bailey and Chai Onwork, who formulated our industrial strategy. What a contrast, the women in our shadow cabinet who wants to strengthen the equality, who wants to make in our work poverty a thing of past, who want to liberate women from the low pay. and the Prime Minister, Theresa May, a woman who certainly doesn't champion other women. Because of this government action, our income, our economic independence, our opportunity have been cut and curtailed. Too many of us amongst the lowest paid in the country in insecure work. This Tory government says the employment figures are higher than ever. But when those jobs are insecure, are 0 hours in part-time, when we want to work more hours, when they don't pay the living wage we deserve, then it's a contract. Well, we are in Labour, are not falling for it. We are not going to put up with the low pay. We are going to ban 0 hours contract, and we are going to abolish employment tribunal fees. Just imagine this instead, the spiteful political choice of austerity. We are committed to fixing the shambolic universal credit, scrapping the dreaded bedroom tax, and repealing the main personal independent payment regulation. We want to not only end the austerity attack on women, but to reverse it and take us closer to equality. We want an economy that works for us. As the poet Shelley said, shake our chains to earth like dew, that in sleep have fallen on you. Yeah, we are many, they are few. Conference, we are all know it's a Labour government that can deliver all these real gains for the women. It's why we are in permanent campaign mode to deliver victory at the next election, which can't come a moment too soon. Thank you.
Afternoon conference, Fraser Amos, delegate for Taunton Deane CLP, and it's my first conference. Conference, I would like to call reference back of the final 4 paragraphs of the subsection titled Social Security and Pensions for All of the Work, Pensions and Equality Report on page 75, and call on the NPF to explicitly commit to scrap all planned welfare cuts. Conference, I joined the Labour Party 3 years ago to help fight every wretched Tory attack on our welfare state, on the poorest and disabled. So I welcome the reiteration in the report of our commitment to end the bedroom tax, to end the ESA work-related activities group cut, to end the new personal independent payments regulations, to scrap the work capability and PIP assessments, and scrap the degrading sanctions regime and other cuts. However, Conference, the section of the report I am referencing back begins by stating that some of the government cuts have been legislated for, but not yet come into effect. It then goes on to note concern about the impact of these cuts and the effects of the benefit freeze on the poorest. Yet, Conference, there is no commitment to scrap these cuts. There is only £2 billion provided to address the £5 billion of cuts to universal credit and support for children. There is no commitment to end the benefits freeze that will hit people harder as inflation rises, and in total, there is no commitment in the report to scrap £7 billion of planned welfare cuts. Conference, this is not good enough. Our party established the welfare state in 1945. It is our job to defend and extend it at every opportunity and stand up for the people we exist to represent. We know that welfare isn't a handout. It's a safety net for everyone. It's all that stands between every one of us and destitution, and if cuts continue, not much of it will be left standing. Conference, we cannot allow any welfare cuts under a Labour government. Let's insist that our party is explicit in its total opposition to every single Tory welfare cut. Conference, please support this reference back. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. You indicated that you wished... Sorry. Yeah. Thank you, Delegate. You indicated that you wish to refer back part of the Work, Pension and Equalities report. Could you confirm the precise clause that you wish to refer back?
So it starts from while the government's cuts to social security have already been legislated for, and it's
page?
that...
Which page?
Page 75. And it's from while the government cuts to social security have already been legislated for, it's from there to the end of that subsection.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
That's
thanks.
moved. This is our final speaker on this debate.
Conference, I'm Angie Airley, delegate for Wealdon CLP in East Sussex. Apologies if I sound a bit raspy. I think it's Tory germ warfare. This is my first conference. I want to share with you a couple of stories about the impact of the Tories' decimation of the welfare state on people in my constituency. Stories that I heard whilst outdoor knocking as candidate for Wealdon earlier this year, when, by the way, we doubled the vote for Labour and came second in a Tory stronghold. First, I want to tell you about Jenny. Jenny's the mum of 2 children, both of whom have profound learning disabilities. The children were recently assessed for personal independence payments, PIP. They scored 0 points on their assessment. This meant the family no longer receive any financial support to facilitate the children's care or mobility needs. In addition to that, their mum, Jenny, is now battling with the DWP to prove that she is a carer and should not be classed as a job seeker for benefits purposes. Then there is Vanda. She's been going through the PIP tribunal process for 18 months. She can't work because she has severe mental health problems, but she is expected to fulfil the work-focused conditions of universal credit, which she finds nearly impossible to do, putting her at severe risk of sanctions. Additionally, we have many older couples in our area paying bedroom tax for 2 or 3 bedroom council properties, which they have no hope of moving out from because there are no 1-bedroom properties to move into. And then there are the stories that I hear in my work in the domestic violence sector. Women whose abusers have control of the entire family income now that they are receiving universal credit, taking away the child benefit and the child tax credit, which were the women's only financial lifeline. The European women married to and financially dependent on British men who can't go into refuges because they can't prove that they've been exercising their treaty rights, and therefore they are not eligible for housing benefits. Women who have fled domestic violence and are in a state of trauma but still have to prove that they are seeking work to be eligible for universal credit because they can't provide written evidence, which would be, for example, a letter from a domestic violence service, to prove that they are eligible for a stay on the work-focused conditions. Comrades, I am delighted that our manifesto pledges to scrap work capability and PIP assessments. But I would urge our party to be bolder in pushing for complete reform of the welfare benefits system, particularly universal credit. Our benefit system should be a safety net and not a scrap heap. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you to all the speakers. Conference. Oh, come up.
Jill Murdoch, Peterborough. I'm sorry to ask a question, but there was a speaker who moved reference back. For obvious reasons, you had no idea what he was going to do, so he was towards the end of the debate. His reference back hasn't actually been seconded, and I wondered, it doesn't need seconding? Oh, I thought I could second it in approximately 30 seconds, but if it doesn't need seconding, okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Conference, I will now ask Debbie Abrahams, Shadow Secretary of State for Work and Pensions, to address. Thank you.
Conference, it's once again an honour to be speaking to you as Labour's Work and Pensions Secretary. Who'd have thought that after leaving school at 15 with just 3 O-levels, I would be standing here today? The passion I feel about building a fairer society has been with me for as long as I can remember. For over 20 years, I worked to tackle inequalities in communities and beyond. And that's what drove me into politics. The more you get into what determines inequality, the more you realise that inequality is not inevitable, it's constructed. The type of society we have, the tolerance and even the trust we feel towards one another reflects how fairly we divide up our collective wealth. Ultimately, this comes down to political choices and leadership. And people are seeing this now. They're seeing the stark contrast between Theresa May's Tories protecting an increasingly wealthy elite and Labour under Jeremy Corbyn, whose entire political life has been dedicated to the many, not the few. His commitment is not a soundbite or a whim. It is who he is and has always been. Over the last 7 years, we have seen the effects of the Tories' ideologically driven austerity policies. A record 7.4 million people living in poverty. Falling real wages, which remain lower than they were in 2008. An unprecedented rise in food bank use. Rough sleeping doubling, and over 120,000 children and their families without a home. A typical UK worker would take 160 years to earn the average annual amount handed to a FTSE 100 boss. And for the first time in decades, we're seeing life expectancy falling. Conference, there can be nothing more unjust than knowing how long we live is determined by inequality in income, wealth, and social position. It doesn't have to be this way. We're the 5th richest country in the world. As our manifesto set out, the next Labour government will make different choices, fairer choices, for the many, not the few. These widening inequalities have stifled growth too. Differences in growth across the UK have led to inequalities in our labour market as well. But the Tory social security policies have failed to respond to this changing world of work, where workers are often stuck in an endless low-pay, no-pay cycle. As one of my constituents, a single mum who works as a nurse in a local hospital, came to see me at one of my surgeries in Oldham recently. In the process of transferring onto universal credit from tax credits, she had to wait more than 6 weeks for a payment, as over 1 in 4 people do. This delay and a number of other administrative issues meant that she couldn't pay all of her rent. When she came to see me, she had been served an eviction notice. In another case, Kelly, who's here today, is worried that she will have a similar experience when UC is rolled out in Wythenshawe. Although she's been on tax credits, she is off work from her cleaning job at Manchester Airport waiting for an operation. Being on statutory sick pay has eaten into her savings and she's now in rent arrears. She said if she had to wait at least 6 weeks to receive her UC payments, she's sure her family would end up being homeless. Conference, on behalf of these women and the 6.5 million families still to move on to universal credit, I'm calling on the Prime Minister to halt next month's UC rollout while we work to fix these issues. As we've heard, our social security system is also failing sick and disabled people. At last year's conference, I played the trailer from I, Daniel Blake, Ken Loach's iconic film about a man recovering from a heart attack but found fit for work and battling for help from the Department for Work and Pensions. Its impact in changing attitudes about social security claimants from the Tories' shirkers-grounger narrative to the reality that the vast majority of claimants have contributed to the system all of their lives cannot be underestimated. And as Ken is also here this afternoon, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank him for all he's done. Ken, take a bow. Not many people know this, but over 2 million people nationally have seen I, Daniel Blake, and about 10 million across the world. So the impact, as I say, Ken, cannot be underestimated. But while the government's rhetoric might be changing, the reality is not, with cuts to social security support and the anguish of unfair assessments. We've already heard about the United Nations Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. They recently reported that this government's policies were leading to a human catastrophe. Increasingly, sick and disabled people are facing isolation and poverty. As my Disability Equality Roadshow revealed, many feel like prisoners in their own homes. With dwindling social security support, too many are dying early and even taking their own lives. As we promised in our manifesto with and for disabled people, Labour will deliver on the rights of disabled people, enshrining the UN Convention into UK law. Conference, a Labour government will transform our social security system from one that demonises to one that is supportive and enabling. Like the NHS, it should be there for any one of us in our time of need, providing dignity and security for all. For older people, this Tory government has provided anything but dignity and security. Their failure to grapple with the pension system has left many with dwindling workplace pensions or worse. At the same time, the Tories have attacked the state pension, and promising to increase the age yet again. This has been most extreme for women born in the 1950s, many of whom have worked for well over 40 years and expected to retire at 60. The acceleration of women's state pension equalisation by this government has left hundreds of thousands of women in dire straits. I've heard of women sofa surfing in their 60s, living off the kindness of family or friends, having used up all of their savings because they can no longer do the work they used to do. Too often, older people are discriminated at work as well as when they try to get into work. A government minister suggested that women should go and find an apprenticeship during a recent debate. Come on, get real. It's absolute nonsense. These women feel understandable anger that they have done the right thing and the government has failed to deliver its side of the bargain. I've been meeting with them on my national pensions tour. We promised in our manifesto to provide pension credit and additional support to the 2.5 million 1950s women still waiting to retire. And as a starter, I can announce today that a Labour government in power now would allow these women to retire up to 2 years early. Conference, this is the difference a Labour government would make. My challenge to this government is to do the same and to do it now. Conference, thank you so much. Thank you to my wonderful team and to my really loving family, especially my husband, John.
We will take the votes on jobs, living standards and equality at the end of the session. Conference, I would now like to ask Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London, to address us.
Conference, thank you. It's great to be back in Labour Brighton. And you know what else? It's great to see our Labour Party so fired up under Jeremy Corbyn. Labour confounded all expectations at the general election this year. And let's be clear, Theresa May called this snap election to try and wipe us out. And boy, did she fail. It was inspiring to see millions of people vote for the first time, especially so many young people. And it was inspiring to see so many people who used to vote for our party return home to Labour. We made huge progress, and credit must go to one person, the leader of our party, Jeremy Corbyn. He mobilised our movement, he motivated our activists and reached voters we hadn't reached before, and also became not just the King of Glastonbury, but the King of Grime too. Thanks to the hard work of Labour members and trade unionists, London elected 4 fantastic new Labour MPs. We now have a Labour Member of Parliament representing Battersea, Enfield Southgate, Croydon Central, and yes, Labour Kensington. And they're here this afternoon. Let's hear it for our Labour gains in London, Marcia de Cordova, Bamba Saralambos, Sarah Jones, and Emma Dent-Code. And by the way, hasn't Emma been an amazing advocate for the neglected residents affected by the terrible Grenfell fire? As a united Labour family, we're on the march, we're on the up. Labour has momentum on our side. Conference, this year's election came during an unbelievably difficult time for London, our capital and the city I love so much. It's been one of the darkest times in London's recent history. We've been through too much suffering, too much horror, and too much loss. The terrorist attack on Westminster, the heart of our democracy. The attack on innocent people enjoying a night out in London Bridge and Borough Market. The horrific fire at Grenfell Tower. The attack on innocent people near Finsbury Park Mosque during Ramadan, and the attack at Parsons Green Station on Londoners as they travelled into work and school. Nobody expects such tragedy, and no one should tolerate it. You know, we prepare and practice for the worst, but we hope and pray it will never happen. Keeping Londoners safe is my top priority, and in all honesty, it's hard. It's by far the hardest part of my job. It really does keep me awake at night, fearing the call in the early hours that came too often this summer to say the worst had happened. More innocent Londoners who have experienced unimaginable horrors, to help and console, more funerals to attend of those who have been killed, and always, always more to do to keep Londoners safe. But Conference, there are some people who spend their entire lives trying to stop these terrible events and who lead our response when they happen, whose job it is to put themselves in harm's way every day to try and keep the rest of us safe, and who do it with dedication, professionalism, and heroism. Conference, please stand and join me to show your appreciation for our amazing emergency services. Thanks to our police officers, community support officers and staff. Thanks to our firefighters and control room operators. Thanks to our frontline NHS staff and all those who support them, our paramedics, nurses, doctors and health workers. And thanks to our transport staff who are so often on the front line. On behalf of all Londoners and the entire Labour Party, thank you for everything you do. You truly are heroes. Thank you, Conference. In the darkness of this year, the bravery of our emergency services has been a beacon of hope. We have witnessed incredible courage and self-sacrifice. Like PC Keith Palmer, who was tragically killed in the line of duty while protecting Parliament. Although he was unarmed, he didn't hesitate before confronting the attacker. Really has a St George's Medal for bravery been so deserved, and our thoughts and prayers will always remain with his family and friends. Or take Colleen Anderson, a junior doctor at St Thomas's Hospital. When she saw the attack from the hospital window, she rushed across the river to treat people lying injured in the road. Or Wayne Marquez, the British Transport Police officer, who single-handedly took on 3 armed attackers at London Bridge. Despite suffering terrible wounds, he fought them off until help arrived. All the hundreds of firefighters who went far above the call of duty to save lives during the fire at Grenfell Tower, who took extraordinary risks with their own safety. And I want to say a special thank you to Danny Cotton, our London Fire Commissioner. Danny led the rescue operation at Grenfell Tower, going into the building and taking those risks alongside our firefighters. I want to thank Danny also for the honesty with which he talked about those awful scenes and for being so open about receiving counselling after the fire. You know, she's encouraged many of our emergency responders and ordinary Londoners to do the same. And we should thank the brave Transport for London staff who calmly helped during the attack at Parsons Green Station, evacuating the train and leading people to safety regardless of the risk to themselves. There's no doubt that we face a growing threat. Experts say that the number of terrorist attacks this year is not a spike, but a long-term shift. And crime is on the rise again. The type of crime we see are more complicated and harder to tackle. Violent crime is rising even faster, with too many killed or maimed as a result of knife crime or acid attacks. And ever more young people are being groomed and radicalised by evil extremists, whether here or abroad. But Conference, it doesn't have to be this way. This all feels very familiar. A weak and divided Tory government, refusing to face up to the challenges ahead, bickering and infighting over Europe, putting our jobs and economy at risk, chronic underinvestment in public services causing a crisis in our schools and hospitals, and crime on the rise. But conference, this isn't the 1990s. This is now. It's like Back to the Future, but it isn't funny. Tory cuts to our emergency services have made it harder to keep us safe. £1 billion cut from the Met Police, £1 billion less for London's policing budget. The result? Fewer police officers on our streets, police stations closed, and neighbourhood policing under attack. Even police counter-terrorism funding has been cut in real terms. The same goes for our fire service: fewer fire engines, fewer fire stations, and fewer firefighters. The same story is true in our National Health Service, our councils, our transport network, and in every one of our public services. Conference, we simply can't go on like this. The brave men and women of our emergency services can't do their job when the Tories are cutting their funding every year. It must stop. The government must give our emergency services the real terms increase in funding they desperately need, and right now. You know, the Tories used to describe themselves as the party of law and order. Well, that sounds like a sick joke today. And frankly, as a former Home Secretary, Theresa May should be utterly ashamed of her record. Labour is the only party with a plan to tackle rising crime. Labour is the only party standing behind the men and women of our emergency services, and Labour is the only party making a real difference in towns and cities across the UK. A Labour government will finally put an end to years of Tory cuts to our emergency services, and a Labour government, led by Jeremy Corbyn, will finally give our emergency services the proper pay rise they so desperately deserve. It's Labour in London, Manchester, Liverpool and Wales that has a real plan to tackle violent crime like gun crime, knife crime and acid attacks. It's Labour that's finally making social integration and community cohesion a priority so we can put a stop to the grooming and radicalisation of our young people. It's Labour that's finally made hate crime and violence against women and girls a top priority for the police. And it's Labour that's restoring community trust in our police by making our emergency services more reflective of the communities they serve. You know, it made me so proud to be the Labour mayor when Cressida Dick was appointed as the first woman Met Commissioner in 188 years. And when Danny Cotton was appointed as the first woman Fire Commissioner in the Brigade's history. And you know what? They were both appointed on merit as the best people for the job, and they are great in their job. Conference, despite the challenges we faced over the last year, I'm optimistic, positive and hopeful about our future. I'm so proud to call myself British and to call myself a Londoner. I'm confident that both London and the UK have bright futures ahead, that we can become a more prosperous, safe and equal country. And Conference, I'm optimistic about Labour's future too. Optimistic that we'll build on the success of Labour in power in London, Manchester, Liverpool and Wales. That will make more progress in the local elections next year. That will make a huge difference in the lives of millions, that we can build a fairer Britain, a more prosperous Britain, a safer Britain, and that Labour, under Jeremy Corbyn, will win the next general election. Thank you.
Thank you, Sadiq. Come up.
Sorry, Alex. Point of order, guys. My name's Daniel and I'm from Hove. I've got bipolar mental health disorder, and I just want to raise a couple of things to the Conference Arrangements Committee. Leaving here earlier was a massive anxiety attack. The queues outside there, for people with disabilities, it's an absolute disgrace. Secondly, we have to eat. By the time we left this conference earlier, eat to get back in again. The time that we've had to debate the equalities issues and people with disabilities, and I don't feel like we've had representation here today. The other thing as well, right, I've seen one person in a wheelchair come up, but how many have we seen in the hall today? And I'd like to see a bit more diversity in the people that are coming up here today, but not just that, guys. We're finishing at 4 o'clock. We can add an extra hour. We brought in the Equality Act. Let's ensure that we're ensuring that our members also have the voice. Come on.
We've already had the debate, but point noted. So as our final speaker today, I am pleased to welcome the interim leader of the Scottish Party, Labour Party, Alex Rowley.
Chair, Conference, thank you very much for that welcome. And can I bring the very best wishes from the Scottish Labour Party to all delegates at this conference. This week, as we gather in Brighton, we gather united, strong and determined to expose how this Tory government is failing working people, strengthened by the size of our movement and united around our leader, the person who will be Labour's next Prime Minister, Jeremy Corbyn. Conference, I was elected to the Scottish Parliament in 2014, and since then I have experienced great highs and lows. There is no doubt that we have seen tough times in Scotland, but we are back on track. And I want to pay tribute to the woman who saw us through after our defeat in 2015, Kezia Dugdale. Friends, Kez stood up for the Scottish Labour Party in the toughest circumstances, both as Deputy Leader and Leader of our party. Conference, let us send our thoughts and our thanks to Kez today. The work that Kez did and the result that she and Jeremy delivered alongside our members in June shows that the Labour Party is once again connecting with communities across Scotland. This year, we won back constituencies from the SNP that people thought were lost for generations. Coatbridge, Chryson and Bells Hill, Rutherglen and Hamilton West, Kirkcaldy and Cowdenbeath, Glasgow North East, East Lothian and Midlothian, along with Edinburgh South. All now represented by Scottish Labour Party MPs, and more will follow. And let's welcome each of our new MPs to conference today, along with our Shadow Secretary of State for Scotland, Leslie Laird. I know we have asked much of you, our members and activists and supporters, over the last few years. But we are so close in so many constituencies, and we should set our sights high. Being a strong opposition should never be enough. Our aim is to win the next election in Scotland, because let me be absolutely clear. Scotland can make the difference at the next election. The choice will be a choice between a Labour government that will tackle poverty, increase family incomes and raise the standards for all, or more decline, decay and drift with a Tory government. Conference, it is not the SNP that can deliver an end to the Tories, it is the Scottish Labour Party. Friends, we will win because we will have the best candidates, the better ideas and the bigger vision. That's what our manifesto gave us this year. A plan for the many, not the few. In England, people saw straight through Theresa May's hollow words, because this is what a strong and stable status quo means for working people in this country. Cuts to public services, cuts to schools and cuts to hospitals, pursued by the Tories in England, but also the SNP in Scotland. The loss of jobs that provided the backbone for communities and the replacement with low pay and insecure work. And the disgrace of people who suffered because of austerity being asked time and time again to pay for that austerity. Conference, this is an affront to every decent, hard-working person in our country. Scotland is a rich country. There is no reason why children need to go hungry, why food banks should be appearing the length and breadth of our country, or why men and women should be forced to spend nights sleeping on our streets. Conference, austerity is a choice, and these are its consequences. And this is what the Labour Party will stand against now and always. Changing our country has to start with changing our government. The election result in June has energised us and shown that the chance to serve again in government in Westminster and in Holyrood is within our reach. Labour's manifesto showed what we will do if we get there. It will be a government for the many, not the few. We will take industries that used to belong to everyone back into public ownership and put profits before first. We will oppose a Tory right-wing hard Brexit. We want a jobs-first Brexit that keeps our access to the single market. And over the next year, under a new Labour leader in Scotland, we will start to lay out what change with Labour would mean. Our party has not been in government in Scotland for 10 years, and that has to change. Whenever the SNP leave government, they will leave having divided our country. Our first job will be to bring our nation together again. And just as Labour has always done, we will bring people together around a vision for the future. In 1945, Labour under Clement Attlee gave us the vision of a national health service and the welfare state. Through the 40s and 50s, Tom Johnson brought power to rural Scotland and pioneered hydroelectricity. In the 1960s, Harold Wilson saw a future powered by the white heat of technology. And in this century, Gordon Brown, a son of Fife and a son of Scotland, ended the scandal of pensioner poverty, made Keir Hardie's vision of a minimum wage a reality, and lifted 1 million children out of poverty. Conference, that's the difference a Labour government makes. And that's why we will never stop fighting for a Labour government that this country needs. Friends, Labour's mission was about building a lasting legacy and giving people the opportunities they need to succeed. Today, we have that vision in Scotland again. We need to set out a plan for our major industries, for oil and gas, for shipbuilding, for finance and food and drink. And we also need to attract the jobs for the future in advanced manufacturing, in renewable energies and in science and technologies. We need to provide this next generation of Scots with better opportunities than the last by investing in education, investing in training and investing in skills. We need to renew our commitment to the public services that look after us from cradle to the grave, our welfare state and our National Health Service. That means being honest about what we have to do in order to pay for these services. As Labour, making the argument that our duties to each other mean that we can afford to pay a little more. Not like the Tories in Scotland, or like the SNP government that only has one tax policy, a tax cut for airlines that will benefit the richest the most. The SNP cannot have a serious debate on tax if its only policy is to kick off a race to the bottom against the UK government, propped up by the DUP, who are desperate to see that tax abolished. The SNP face a choice: work with Labour to use the taxpayers of the Scottish Parliament to protect public services, or give Philip Hammond and Eileen Foster the excuse they are looking for to give the richest in our society another bonus. Conference, the Scottish Parliament has new powers and they do not end with tax. As powers over the welfare state come to force, we need to think about how we can use them to show the kind of society that we want to build. And that is why I renew my calls today for the Scottish Government to use the new powers to add £5 to child benefit, a move that would lift thousands of children out of poverty up and down Scotland. This would send a clear signal that in Scotland we are willing to pay so that every child can get the best start in life. Conference, we can afford this change and we should make it for the generations now and the generations to come. Conference, if we are to build a better society, we also need to think about how we run our country. Scotland has been divided for too long by the question of independence. And now the UK is divided by Brexit. Our nations face the greatest political change of our lifetimes. When power returns from Europe, maintaining the status quo should not be an option, because how we run our country isn't just an abstract discussion for politicians and academics. It's about how we enable working people across our country to have the power as close to their hands as possible. That is why I am proud that Scottish Labour supports federalism, and is why I believe this points the way for the future of our country. With the Tories and the SNP, we have two governments with no interest in reforming how the UK works or making it work better. That is why it must fall to the Labour Party, and why I renew my call today for a constitutional convention convened by the Labour Party to determine how our country can be renewed for the future. In conference, let me be very clear. We will resist at every turn the Tory Brexit power grab. In government, Labour will defend Donald Dure's devolution settlement, Labour's devolution settlement, so that the powers of the Scottish Parliament can never be diminished. For many who voted yes in the 2014 referendum in Scotland, Jeremy has provided them with real hope of an alternative. He has shown that change is possible within the United Kingdom. That should now be matched by a commitment from Labour for a constitutional convention, a federal solution for the United Kingdom, with Scotland as a full and equal partner. Conference, the challenge ahead of us is straightforward: to restore Labour to government in Scotland and across the United Kingdom. Whoever wins our leadership election in Scotland will be the candidate for First Minister of Scotland, and we will get behind that leader to make that happen. And in Jeremy, we have a leader who is a Prime Minister in waiting. So let us leave this conference later this week united, determined and strong. Let us win the next election for working people. Let us win to stand against poverty and inequality. Conference, let's win for Labour.
So before we move on to the votes, the Conference magazine has not included details of the Faiths reception in the fringe listings. Details are annual conference Faiths reception, 4 p.m. Monday afternoon, Hall 7, Tweed Room, Hilton Brighton Metropole Hotel. The main speaker is Shabana Mahmood, I can't know, Mahmood, yeah, MP for Birmingham Ladywood. Thank you. Yeah, I said the point was noted, so we'll refer it to the CAC. So I said to the delegate that the point was noted. I'm now saying I'm going to refer it to the CAC. You're welcome. So we'll now take the votes on the economic debate. First, contemporary composite 1 on growth and prosperity, moved by Unite. Can I see all those in favour and those against?
Take a point of order during a vote.
Sorry, I've called for the vote. So I've called for the vote.
It's on the document later.
So,
there was a call for reference back on reverse to social security cuts, so there should be a vote on that reference back.
I'm going to do that. So we'll now take the votes on the economic debate. First, contemporary composite 1 on growth and prosperity, moved by Unite. Can I see all those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Next, contemporary composite 2 on public sector pay, moved by Unison. Can I see all those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Next, contemporary composite 3 on public sector pay, moved by Community. Can I see all those in favour? And those against? That's carried. Yep. So, contemporary composite 4 on workers' rights, moved by Usdaw. Can I see all those in favour? And those against? That's carried. The Economy, Business and Trade Policy Commission Annual Report. All those in favour? Yeah. All those in favour?
It's not this report, it's the next report.
So it is, the reference back was not on this report. So I'll take that again. So all those in favour? And those against? Oh, sorry, just carrying it, sorry. Next, we'll take the votes on the Work, Pensions and Equalities Policy Commission Annual Report. And this is reference back, so I'll do it now. The delegate from Taunton Deane CLP moved reference back of paragraphs 4 to 7 on page 75 and explained his reasons for doing so. To be clear, this is the final 4 paragraphs of the section on social security and pensions for all, beginning while the government's cuts to social security. The effect of a reference back being passed is that the Work, Pensions and Equality Policy Commission and National Policy Forum are instructed to reconsider the contents of that section and report back next year. We will now take the vote on the reference back. First, we'll take a show of hands. If that is not conclusive, we will take a separate show of hands amongst CLP and affiliated delegates. If that's inconclusive, we will take a card vote. Can I see all those in favour of referring back paragraphs 4 to 7 on page 75 of the Work, Pensions and Equality Policy Commission annual report? And those against? Oh.
It's a split between the affiliates and the split.
So that wasn't conclusive, so can we now? Wasn't. Can we now take a vote just among CLP delegates? Can I see all those in favour of the reference back?
Just constituencies. Let's stress this is
Just constituencies. And those against? Okay. Affiliated delegates, can I see all those in favour of reference back? And those against?
reference back's carried.
The reference back's carried. Where am I now?
Now we have to take the vote.
Friends, can we now take a vote on the whole Work Policy Commission report, incorporating the reference back as agreed? Can I see all those in favour of the report? And those against? That's carried. So finally, the NEC statement on Brexit. Can I see all those in favour? And those against? That's carried.
Okay, adjourn to seminars.
Conference, we will now adjourn to reconvene in seminars. Our next plenary session is at 9:30 tomorrow morning.